So before we get into this video, if you guys want to check out my feature film Pasadilla, as well as my social media, my other short films, and my Letterboxd, IMDb, all that stuff, you can check out my link tree down below. It would mean the world to me. I'm always looking to meet with other content creators and filmmakers. Check it out. So today we're going to talk about honestly, it is one of my favorite films of all time, Eyes Wide Shut, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Last night I had the incredible opportunity to watch Eyes Wide Shut in a theater, and let me tell you, that was the way to experience it. Admittedly, I've seen this film more times than I can count, but there's something about a Stanley Kubrick film that really resonates with me. I mean, he's one of my favorite directors, and the one that I look up to the most. I didn't always feel this way initially. I wasn't a big fan of Kubrick, but as I learned more about his personal life and his meticulous filmmaking process, I don't know, I found myself connecting with him as a person and a filmmaker. He's just a very unique individual. I feel like a lot of people don't really know too much about him just because that's sort of the way that he presented himself. He's a cool dude, even though I never met the guy. Eyes Wide Shut is Kubrick's final film, and it starred Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. It's famously known to have one of the longest production shoots in history. I can only imagine some of the challenges that went on that set. I mean, if you're on set for over a year, some of the stories to be told, yeah. Now, I'm not here to dive into all the philosophical interpretations of Eyes Wide Shut or the deeper meanings, the film's symbolisms, Kubrick's view on cinema, or even the speculation surrounding his death. Plenty of videos and essays that they've covered these angles, and you should definitely go watch those. But what I wanted to focus on instead was my personal experience with the film, how I viewed it, what my thoughts are. The details I noticed during this rewatch, especially someone who's seen every Kubrick film many times, also had a chance to see 2001 in 70mm, which I also made a video about that. That was a very terrific experience. One thing that stood out during this viewing of Eyes Wide Shut was its simplicity. I mean, for a director as celebrated as Kubrick, he's often regarded as the greatest filmmaker of all time, or one of the greatest. This film is relatively straightforward in structure, especially given its long runtime. I mean, visually it doesn't attempt to do anything extravagant, and the steady lockdown camera shots dominate the film. Not much handheld work or anything. The approach feels different from what we're associated with Kubrick. Now, I know that Kubrick didn't use handheld a lot. He did, for Clockwork Orange and Barry Lyndon, 2001, but he did switch over to Steadicam in The Shining and Full Metal Jacket. But this film, it's a lot more prominent. It's a lot more fast-paced. And also, the film doesn't present all of those signature wide-angle shots and cold cinematography that we sort of know Kubrick for. This film felt very personal. There's a lot of close-ups. There's a lot of shallow depth of field. Things are not really presented in the one-point perspective as some, other films that Kubrick made, which is kind of bizarre considering this was his last film and he said it was his greatest, contribution to cinema yet. But with most of the film being captured in a shallow depth of field, like for dialogue sequences and stuff, the framing, it feels looser, almost as if Kubrick was intentionally sacrificing his usual visual style to maintain tighter control over the narrative. It's a unique choice, and it made me wonder what other stylistic directions Kubrick would have went for future films. I mean, when you make a film, you make films throughout your life, you're obviously going to change. And 13 years between Eyes Wide Shut and Full Metal Jacket, I just can't imagine what he would have done with films after Eyes Wide Shut, what new techniques he would have adopted as technology advanced. This brings up an important point about the filmmakers in general. Styles often evolve over time. I mean, directors experiment with different tools, new aspect ratios, lenses, or an entirely new approach of storytelling. Considering that 13 years passed between Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut, it's natural to think that Kubrick's style could have shifted. One detail I did notice in Eyes Wide Shut, which may or may not have been intentional, is during a lot of the dialogue scenes, one character is framed with a shallow depth of field while the other is shot wide open. It's an interesting contrast between the two characters. I'm not sure if it was completely intentional, if there was some thought into it, or maybe it was just some logistics or something economical involved. Another highlight of the film are the performances by Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. During my theater experience, I was surprised to hear how much laughter came from the audience during certain moments. The banter, the arguments between the characters, especially when they revealed their personal and provocative stories, it had sort of this edge to the crowd. I mean, people were giggling and laughing. I just didn't expect it for Eyes Wide Shut because I never thought of Eyes Wide Shut as, say, a comedic film. But another moment that got a strong reaction was when Bill Hartford, played by Tom Cruise, flashed his doctor's badge around like an FBI or police badge. It sparked a lot of conversation in the theater, and it got me thinking about Bill's personality and how he seems to view his position of power as placing him above others. It's as, in a sense, his entitlement is centered around kind of how he navigates the world, which is kind of true, I think, because if you watch the film, when he's talking to Nick Nightingale, he feels almost as if he's entitled to go to this party, even though he just heard about it. Or when he goes to the costume shop, it is closed, and he goes in anyway because he's got the money. Also, when he goes into the woman's house to, quote unquote, his wife calls and he decides he's just going to give her money anyway. So he's in these positions where he can do things that maybe a normal person couldn't do. And it makes him a very unique character, because I didn't necessarily not like Bill Hartford, but at the same time, he is kind of a poo. He's a poo. But I can't help but think of the fascinating aspect about Eyes Wide Shut and how it's different compared to Kubrick's other films. I mean, the heavy use of dissolves, the abundance of establishing shots, some of which Kubrick was not actually there, and a dreamlike quality created by fake backdrops visible through windows all contribute to the film's unique atmosphere. I mean, the intense blues, the shadows, and the artificial cityscapes heighten the sense of what you're watching may not be entirely real. Most of the film was shot on a soundstage, and that's not a practice unknown to Kubrick. I mean, he did it in Full Metal Jacket, he did it in, well, of course, Eyes Wide Shut, but he also did it in The Shining, so this is nothing new at all. 2001 too, but you couldn't go to space, although Kubrick might as well have. It's sad that Kubrick passed away just 4 days after showing the final cut of this film to the studio, and in many ways it feels like its most personal and connected work. Watching it again on the big screen, I felt a really big, deep connection for the artistry and the intention behind every moment. I mean, perhaps my opinion is influenced by the theatrical experience itself, but I absolutely love Eyes Wide Shut, and I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it, or who hasn't revisited it in a while. I mean, there's always something new to discover in a Kubrick film. I mean, that's for dang sure. All in all, I think watching Eyes Wide Shut this time around really did remind me of how special Kubrick was as a filmmaker, even whenever he's not trying to be as stylistic as he usually is, hint, one-point perspective, meticulous framing, etc., because Eyes Wide Shut does not have that. It has it in certain moments, but I do think that this is the most loose we've ever seen Kubrick in terms of visual style. I mean, the shallow depths of field, the dissolves, the way the camera moves, the establishing shots. It feels very different compared to other Kubrick films. Now, you could say that this film was not finished and he didn't get a chance to actually complete the film, but I do think in a way that's kind of ridiculous to state, given the footage was filmed regardless and it was put into the film. I feel like before Kubrick would have showed a cut, given how great he was as a filmmaker and how meticulous he was about people viewing his work, the way that he shot, he would have removed things before showing it to the cast, the crew, and whoever else was involved on the film. From what it seems, Eyes Wide Shut is a finished film in terms of the way that it was cut, the way that it's presented. I think the only things that he didn't get a chance to figure out completely from what I viewed is sort of the sound mixing and the soundtrack and music placements and stuff like that. But for the most part, it seems like the film was kind of finished. I also do have to acknowledge that I did watch I watched the censored version of the film, where whenever Bill Hartford is going in the mansion and things are happening, there are placed people and CGI stuff littered throughout to cover some things. That actually really disappointed me, because I feel like we do live in an age now where that stuff can be shown. I mean, I feel like Eyes Wide Shut is kind of the new version of PG-13 in a way. I just think that that's just kind of how it is. But again, watching Eyes Wide Shut on a big screen was a phenomenal experience. I would recommend everybody go see a Kubrick film on the big screen. This is the second one I had a chance to see on the big screen, being 2001 and Eyes Wide Shut. I hope to get to see more in the future. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of Eyes Wide Shut down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.